Greetings, traveler. Have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to find the solution to a game design problem and just nothing is working out? You're trying to find a way for the player to use a system easily, but something always comes up and you cannot find the solution. This has happened to me several times in the past, and whenever I was in that situation, I was wishing for the solution to jump out at me or some senior designer to come and tell me what to do. Needless to say, that never happened. But that also taught me something that I want to share with you today. And to better understand this, I'm going to share two stories. So one is going to be the hard mode of trying to find this, and the other is going to be the easy mode. So let's jump in. My name is Xanthos. I've been working in the games industry for over 14 years, and in the beginning of my career, this kind of situation plagued me all of the time. I would come up against seemingly impossible to solve game design challenges, having to adapt systems from different games to serve the game we were working on at the moment. And I just had no way of reasoning about these solutions, and somehow I had no help from the senior designers on the team who seemed equally lost about how to solve each particular problem. So let me tell you the hard way of a case of going about this. So I had just joined this team back in the day, and the game director of that particular team wanted to, in a 6-month period, make a small mobile game that was based on tower defense, but he wanted to make it a 3-way fight. So not just 1 versus 1, but have 3 players fighting each other. Cool concept. I saw nothing wrong with it. We started work immediately, and the first problem that jumped up was, how do you display 3 players in a tower defense mode on the screen? Of course, you could put them side by side or any other of the common layouts, but one of the consistent problems was, how can you show with enough detail units that are far away from your tower and be able to understand which one of these faraway units is a threat. When the units come to attack your tower, of course they're going to be close by so you can see them, or you can see them well enough, and they're going to be big on the screen so you can identify them. But when they're far away, they're going to appear very, very small. If you had gone with a top-down approach, then yes, you can see everything in a constant size always, but the proportion of the distance between all the players becomes weird because most phones have a wide screen. So how would you express that on a wide screen? That is not to say that this problem is insolvable, but we had a really, really hard time reasoning about the solution before finally coming up with the answer. But the difficult part of this process is that we took a concept from a different game and we tried to use it as is in our game without really taking the time to work out all the particular details of that problem and make sure we have a mature solution to this particular situation. Did we come up with a solution eventually? Yes, but coming up with that solution took us so much time that the 6-month timeline for this project was basically impossible. So, and that was just one problem. We had to solve several other design problems before we would go forward. So that was definitely the hard mode of going about it. What was the easy mode of going about it? So in the current game that I'm working on at the moment, it's about airships fighting with each other, right? It's a vehicle combat game. Now, in many vehicle combat games, the way you shoot the enemy is you use the mouse to look at the enemy you want to shoot, and usually in the middle of the screen there's a crosshair, and when you click, you just shoot towards that crosshair. So it's very easy to shoot at the enemies. However, we want to go with gameplay style where ships that are like long and have the cannons on their sides would shoot out of their broadside instead of from a turret. the cannons would be fixed on the side. So there are many games that have this style of gameplay, usually games that revolve around Age of Sail combat, and we did have a look at all of them, but we couldn't quite find a solution in another game that would fit perfectly our situation. And this goes back to finding a situation out there that perfectly solves our problem, so we can just plug and play that solution in our game. So knowing what I know from my previous experiences in this type of a problem, I realized that this is an important problem to solve, and if we want to deliver a game that answers this promise of this grand mid-air, airship to airship, broadside firing, cannon mayhem kind of combat, then this would be a problem that has to be solved. We couldn't borrow a system from another game, and we couldn't just come up with a cheap solution, because this would be very central to our game. So surprisingly, the easy way of going about this is to simply have trial after trial and have a situation where we have more time than, let's say, 6 months, or we're not on a very aggressive time horizon, which was a different problem to solve development-wise, and say that this is an important problem to solve. This is going to take time. We're going to have to do lots of iterations, but as all difficult problems out there, there is great value in solving them, since difficult problems are difficult for everyone. And if they were easy, they would have been solved already. So what we did in the end was indeed take about 2.5 years of prototype after prototype to specifically solve this situation. Now, this is not the only thing we did in those 2.5 years. We're working on other areas of the game as well. But solving the targeting and shooting mechanic for this particular situation was time consuming. And it was a good thing that it was time consuming, because it let us, prototype after prototype, understand more and more about this situation. And this is what I suppose the expression the path of most resistance means, as opposed to the path of least resistance. The path of least resistance would be either to borrow a system from another game and use it just like that, or some genius mega game designer coming and telling us, oh, this thing, that's how you should do that, and us moving on with our lives. The path of most resistance was basically to face the hardship of identifying each and every problems that come up one by one. And instead of being stressed about it and rushing towards an imaginary deadline, understand that this is what it is. This is the cost that our ambition has. And it's a problem worth solving, because I don't know what the future holds for this game, but to be able to deliver the experience we want, this is definitely something we would have to solve. So eventually, after trial and understanding what are the negative points of each iteration and what are all the things we shouldn't do, we did arrive to a solution that was easy to use, and it felt flowy, and it looks similar to many other things out there, but it has its own unique take on this type of targeting situation. Again, I don't know how every possible player in the future is going to interact with this system, but for our development team and for the external playtesters that have tried it so far, it seems to be a system that is easy to use and is enjoyable, and it's easy to learn for new players. So what is the benefit of this path of most resistance, and why is that the easy mode? Well, because if we had adopted a solution from somewhere else without really thinking about it, or if somebody had come and solved this problem for us, we wouldn't have grown as a team, and we definitely wouldn't have developed the best possible system for our game, for this situation. And when in the future someone says, your system, you should modify it in so and so way, because that suggestion is most likely something we have tried already, we can reason whether that's a good suggestion or not for how to improve the system. If we hadn't gone through the trouble of going through all these targeting prototypes and finding out what works and what doesn't, then any possible suggestion out there would have seemed like a good suggestion for us to follow for a further iteration of that system. And of course, iteration while the game is still in development is much cheaper, much easier to do than when the game is out there, right? So if the game is already out there, not only there is a bigger cost to changing everything, but also you might upset someone who already liked the system and doesn't want to part with it. It also is a battle with expectation for players. Some will like this, some will like that. And it's not just about players being evil or anything, but people have preferences. And no matter what topic, there is a distribution of likes and dislikes. So any change to any system, some people like and some people dislike. It's just the way of the world. So going through this path of most resistance and taking the time and finding all these little so-called failed iterations, in the end let us know which one the correct one is at this point in time and why it is the correct solution for us. Why does it serve us better than any other iteration we tried? Sometimes knowing what not to do is just as valuable or even more valuable than knowing what to do to solve a situation. And this was definitely something that worked for us, and I can see the value of doing that. How does that relate to your situation, traveler, to what you might be doing right now? In life, we tend to do the things that we know how to do, that are easy for us, that are familiar and comfortable, and we tend to avoid things that we do not know how to do. Those things we label difficult, impossible, we're lacking some key resource to do it, and so on. But it's something that happens to everyone, and it can be deceiving to our minds, I think. So perhaps not with game development, but if you have ever played a video game, surely you must have felt this feeling yourself, right? You play the game, you fight the bosses in the game. As long as you can defeat the bosses easily, you have no problem proceeding in the game. But once you find a boss that you cannot defeat, then perhaps you want to persevere and learn how to defeat it, but for a moment there's going to be that feeling that tugs on your soul that says, oh man, this is so bothersome. Why do I have to stop on this stupid boss? Why do I have to learn its movements? I was having such a good time until now. And then you try the boss a couple of times and you still lose. Well, I don't know if there's games left today that are that difficult, but you definitely have this feeling of, this is something I don't know how to do, and it upsets me that I don't know how to do it, and I wish to not be upset, basically. This is nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with this. This is very human. I feel it all the time, both about game development and playing games and everything else in life. But through that experience I had with development, I realized how interesting this situation is and how beneficial it can be. So by taking the time and deconstructing this big wall, big problem, big difficulty that I have in a game or development or anything else in life, I see that there's really nothing difficult about that situation. There's nothing inherent about that situation. This also comes up a lot when you're trying to do programming, right? It might be a new language that you're trying out, or it might be some new framework, or trying to work together with some other API or something, and things are just not working out. And there in that moment you're feeling, oh man, would it be so difficult for this to just work? You feel that life would be so much easier if everything worked. And of course that's an understandable feeling. The value our society tries its best to bury and hide and never talk about is how much the situation is revealing to you. So by seeing that this is something difficult to you, you know that there must be so much value here to be discovered. So if you do take the time to examine this more, research it more, ask people about it, get someone's input about how to solve it, see how other people solve the situation, not just asking for a ready solution, but seeking to understand, really. And development in that sense is a lot about understanding and very little about effort and trying and pushing really hard. That doesn't really work with this kind of thing. You just have to understand and improve your design or improve your approach, really. It's very much an analytical task rather than a high effort and high push or whatever task. So this just gives you the opportunity to analyze it, and it's something that usually we can look at relaxed, and we have all the time in the world to examine. So when that situation happens, just remember that this is really an opportunity to get to learn how to do something you didn't know how to do before. And when you gain that skill, then you will feel really, really powerful. Coming across all the things that you don't know how to do and doing everything wrong in the beginning is amazingly good for learning what doesn't work. And when you know everything that doesn't work, all that's left is what works. Anyway, if you find yourself in a situation like that, perhaps giving this approach a thought might be beneficial. If this helps for at least one other traveler out there, I will be super happy. And if you're struggling with a situation like that right now, especially in game development, please let me know. I might be able to offer some input. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much for your time, and as always, have fun.